Thank you, everybody. Yeah, it's great to be here. My name's Jon Drea. I'm Head of Data Science at National Highways. The subject of the presentation today is driving the development of the digital road network. But let's take that down a level because this is a geospatial conference. So really, the fundamental focus of it will be how do we make sure that we put GIS and geospatial front and center of what we do in the future, in the bounds of the future digital road. So, and I'll talk to you about that for the next 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how long we've got left. And this is the question, really, I want you to keep in the back of your mind, really. So this is really core to what the presentation is about today. So, is geography core to your business? And if so, do you give it the attention that it deserves? So just to give you a bit of background as to who National Highways are, there's a slide on screen that's quite useful. Just to run through a few bullet points. 95 million miles are travelled on the UK strategic road network every year, and it carries 3 times more people than the UK rail network. I'm sure you all use our roads regularly for work, for leisure. In distance travelled, the strategic road network makes up a small proportion of all roads, but it makes up about 34% of car movements and 68% of all freight. So I'm sure you all get Amazon parcels, probably more since the pandemic, and they all get to you via our strategic road network. We maintain, renew, and operate a huge amount of physical assets. You can see a selection of these on slides. Just to name but a few, we have around about 100,000 street lights, 10,000 miles of carriageway, and 20,000 bridges, just to name a few. We're a really big asset management company, and we play a strategically important role in both England, actually, and the wider UK. We've got a really clear understanding of the value of our physical assets. This is something that we've done for years, for decades, in fact. We value them around about £128 billion. So there's 2 questions, really. The firstly, what would happen if we treated our physical assets like we have done historically with our data assets? There's a fairly flippant answer to this. We'd probably have 3 of these bridges that you can see on screen to different specifications. None of them would connect to the road network, and we wouldn't know exactly where they are. Really, for me, this leads on to a second and much more important question. So what if we treated our data assets like we have done historically, our physical assets? Today, I'd like to share with you the journey we've been on to completely reevaluate the way we value our data, particularly our spatial data, and what this has meant for how we operate our business. For the rest of the presentation, I'll explore 4 things. Firstly, what if we decided to treat our data in different ways? And what if we treated them in a similar way to our physical assets? Secondly, what we found out as we did this. I'll then run through what we did, and then finally, we'll look at how we managed to elevate the conversation around geospatial data to a senior level within the organisation, because I think that's a challenge that actually we all have probably in this room. Okay, so going back to the bridge analogy earlier, data is an asset in the same way as our physical assets are. So if we treated them in the same way, we need to understand their value. In the same way we know that the bridge in the picture plays a vital role in connecting our country, we need to know the role that our data plays as well. This was a challenge that our Chief Data Officer took on in 2018, and he kicked off a piece of work to get to the bottom of this value question. I'll talk through briefly how we did this. The first step was to work with our economists to establish the economic value of our intangible assets. We knew at the time our physical assets had a value of about 115 billion, recognising this was a few years ago now. This represents the cost of replacing the strategic road network. We also know that our network there's a cost-benefit factor of about 2.7. Multiplying these 2 numbers together and removing the value of our physical assets gave us a value of our intangible assets, about 196 billion pounds. Of this, 60 billion was attributed to data. So following this economic exercise, we understood how much our data was worth broadly. The next question was to understand what drives that value. We carried out more than 80 interviews across 6 stakeholder groups. These stakeholder groups were leisure, local authorities, commuter, logistics, and retail and major transport hubs. We wanted to understand what the use cases that drove the value. To pick on one, we understood that the SRN, Strategic Road Network, is incredibly important to the transport and logistics sector to get food to market. We then looked at the data sets National Highways owns that drive the value through these use cases. You can see on the slide that we've identified 26 data sets in National Highways. These support 27 key initiatives for our stakeholders, the stakeholders I mentioned a second ago. These important data sets are contained in a small table on the right-hand side. You can see a whole host of different data sets here, everything from traffic flow to footage, CCTV, and so on. The next stage was to understand how dependent each of these initiatives were on the various data sets. We did this through a workshop with leaders across national highways. We used a predictive analytics model to rank the various initiatives on the reliance of data. This was contained in the table on the right-hand side of the slide. Ignore the numbers for now, they're less important, but look at the colours. The green ones are the initiatives that most rely on data. Speed and flow management, diversion routes, and roadworks information stand out as quite important at the top of the table. Some further data science was carried out to allocate value to each of our data sets. We had a really nice line of sight now from the initiatives that add value through to stakeholder groups, and then added the value back to the understanding of what the intangible value was. This really helps us bring to life the value of our data sets, which can otherwise be hard to understand. It also helped us talk to senior stakeholder groups about why our data is important and what it drove for the UK economy. It hurts my brain talking about it quite a lot, if I'm honest, because it's my boss's work. So I'll summarise it with why it's important. To cut a very long story short, our evaluation showed us that, following some really robust analysis, that location data for our strategic road network was the most important. It'd be a fairly irrelevant presentation at the Esri conference if it wasn't. We discovered that most of our use cases are dependent on our geospatial network model. The network model is about 10% of the total value of our data and about 3% of the intangible value of national highways. So therefore, it's kind of a big deal. This left me with a quandary when I joined National Highways around about 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. Linking back to the question I posed at the start of the presentation, we now knew that geography is really important to our business, and we weren't giving it the attention that it deserves. We needed to do something about this, and this is something that I wanted to put right. Okay, so how did we start? We looked to find out more about the problems we had with geospatial data in the organisation. We undertook a fairly quick piece of discovery work and found out that the organisation had a number of system-level network models, which all differed slightly. This meant that we didn't have an agreed digital view of where our road was. Given the importance of the data, this was a problem. We were paying way over the odds for a number of different systems and viewers to exploit geospatial data. We had a few tricky problems, including a number of things that we had to get right for our regulator, and the business wasn't really clear on how to solve them. Really importantly, there was a potential safety risk. If we can't get our geometry data out quickly to sat-nav providers and others, there's a risk that drivers can be routed in the wrong way, potentially into safety-critical situations. We set up a project to solve some of these problems. The project was broadly in the 3 areas that you can see on slide now. We knew that first of all we had to solve the network problem. There's currently a clear need for a consistent view of where our strategic road network is. This was becoming more and more important when we moved to the world of connected and autonomous vehicles. We saw this as a piece of foundational work. This is something that we absolutely had to get right for the future. Next, we wanted to enable the exploitation of geospatial data. We wanted to give National Highways the ability to make the most of its data and change the way the business works through its use. We launched something called our Spatial portal, and I'll come on to explain with an example of how that's being used. Finally, there was a real need to open up our spatial data to others. There was an immediate use case, the need to publish emergency area location data, but in the longer term, data sharing will become more and more important to what we do, so we launched our open data site. So let me give you some examples now, and hopefully this slide will change behind me. The first problem we looked at was the common view of where our network is. Linking back to the data valuation work, we now knew that this was our most important data set, and we didn't have a clear view on what it was or where it was. It was also one that carries a safety risk. We need to let our stakeholders, including sat-nav companies as I've mentioned, know when we make changes to our geometry and where those changes were. The slide on screen gives quite a nice indication of the problem. The red and yellow lines that you can see are a digital representation of the same road within different systems within National Highways. You can see all sorts of problems here. Firstly, there's a few historical issues. So you can see historical instances of where the roads, the two models don't align. This really is down to the way that the data was captured. Secondly, you can probably see some temporal issues as well, particularly when you look at the roundabout at the top of the screen. You can see that the model of the road has been realigned at some point. This hasn't been updated in the red model, exacerbating the problem of what the true digital representation of where the road is. The blue line is the new consolidated network model. This will become, over time, the single version of the truth. It won't be a quick win, but it's something that we'll get in place over the next few years. We'll slowly but surely replace all the network models in our systems with this business-owned network model. This is really important to us. We want to make sure that we have one version of the truth of our most important data asset. So our next big challenge was to help the organisation fully exploit the geospatial data. Linking back to our discovery work, we knew that we were doing this in a piecemeal, a fairly ineffective way. There are some real pockets of GIS excellence across the organisation, actually, I must say that. But we wanted to elevate this and make sure that the geospatial data was really driving forward the business. We put in place what we called our Spatial portal and engaged right across the business. We actively pushed people to think about using geospatial data in a different way. There were efficiency benefits by moving to one platform, and we saved quite a lot of money. But we were also much more effective as well. Teams have begun to realise that geography is core to our business, and we can use it to improve our delivery as a company. The slide on screen shows how our operations team have utilised the Spatial portal to build something that we call single view of the network. There are a number of different challenges that we tried to solve with this tool. Control rooms tend to be mostly reactive in what they do. Multiple tools, systems, and reports are used independently of each other. Data is used inconsistently across the regions. It can be used for traffic office deployment, live incident management, and proactive response. So how does it work? The user can navigate the dashboard by selecting the regions or outstations from the top, or by zooming in and out of the map. Lots of different data sets can be shown on the map, for example, traffic officer locations, as well as assets and weather events. We can look at crowdsourced data utilising velocity, as was mentioned in the plenary earlier, and we can link that to our CCTV data to help manage incidents, all on one interface. The right-hand side of the screen summarises what's happening on the network and facilitates decision-making, i.e. how are incidents managed. The panel on your left gives you notification on incidents that don't seem to have been managed yet. We can select one and click on the data we want to see. In the case of the video that's been repeating on screen, that's zoomed in and out of an incident that's been identified through crowdsourced data and used our own CCTV imagery to see what was going on. I'm probably doing this a disservice, but I don't think there's much here that's hugely clever or complicated. We're just getting the basics of geospatial data right and building a nice intuitive front end to help us use this information on the network. This will drive financial safety and even carbon benefits for the organisation, as well as improve the experience of the road user. It's gone down really well, actually, and if I'll show you this next slide, we could see that we carried out a kind of an internal view on what people think of this new approach to geospatial data, and we got a really good score back and some excellent feedback, which has given us food for thought, but also some problems. It's given us food for thought for this specific use case, but also everybody wants to be part of single view of the network, so we've got to really make sure that the organisation focuses on what the use cases are. Okay. The third piece of work was to open up our data for others to use. National Highways is an information provider, not a journey planner. We leave that to people like Google or Apple. They're much better than we are at it. And our relationship's probably going to change over the years to being from a business to consumer to a business to business consumer relationship, which is the direction we need to take our open data. So to get value from the data, we have to make sure that it's open for others. We launched our open data site with a specific use case, the emergency areas that I mentioned earlier. We've steadily added other data sets to the site, and I think we're up to about 5 now, which isn't many, but we're building. The site's become increasingly important as we move forward our digital customer agenda, part of the Digital Roads programme. You can see on screen that it's really easy to use. Just search for a data type that you want, and then you can view it and download it via an API. Finally, I said I'd touch on how we elevated the conversation around spatial data within the organisation. And I'll just go through some of these points on screen now. So senior sponsorship was incredibly important to us. Our CDO helped us drive forward, and we had the support of our executive group for digital and data. We clearly defined where we wanted to take data generally for our information vision and strategy. This was built collaboratively with leaders across the organisation and signed off by the board. Our data valuation work showed us the importance of geospatial data within the organisation. We had a couple of burning platforms that we had to take care of. We had a regulatory requirement to share emergency refuge points on our network. We used funding available for this to finance the whole project. Our issues over geometry were highlighted by senior staff as a safety risk, as well as was the importance of understanding our network and providing data in a timely way to our stakeholders. We elevated the conversation at the right time in the right way. We only talked about our work when we had something interesting to show. We avoided talking technically and used language that our stakeholders understood. Finally, I'd like to talk about the culture that we developed across the project. We worked in an agile way with Esri. We developed a really good working style, and we worked stuff out as we went along, solved problems together. We worked properly in a partnership as opposed to a supplier-client relationship, which worked really well. Along the way as well, we built excellent working relationships with Ordnance Survey, who've been incredibly helpful to us, and they helped us with the initial ingest of our network model. the level of knowledge and passion that these organisations have brought to us really helped us and made the subject interesting to us all, actually. Okay, so that's it really. So I'd like to just reflect on the conversation, the question I started with, which is really, to reflect on your own organisations. Is geography a core part of what you do? And if the answer is yes, does your business act like it? So thanks very much. And just, if you want to find out more about what we do, there's some details of where our Digital Roads programme can be found. Okay, thank you.